I've got some Neapolitan
Naturally,
ice
lots
cream.
of. Yeah, I want Neapolitan ice cream.
I've got some in the freezer.
I hate chocolate ice cream. It's fucking foul.
Hey party people, Oath 12 here and welcome to the 12th Suburban Gooner Podcast, the number of Mr. Giroud and Mr. Henry before him. This week we welcome back Chris from his duty selling Mr. Defoe to Toronto. Has that deal gone through yet, Chris?
Yes, he was packaged in a very, very small box, and he's sitting on that big tower thing that they have in Toronto, in Canada. So,
good news.
Done.
And also the ever-present Ben. And we have a special guest who we borrowed from the Goonersphere Podcast. It isn't just any Daniel Cowan, it is the Daniel Cowan. Hi, Daniel.
How's it going, chaps?
You with us too, Ben?
Yes, all good. You bypassed me.
Yeah, I bypass you. You're always here. You don't let us down like Chris.
Okay.
I thought we'd jump straight in, guys, and talk about the Fulham game. Obviously, the first half was a bit boring, but just really to get your thoughts on the whole thing. We'll start with you, Daniel.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the first half was a bit boring, a bit tense. I think maybe Fulham had the better chances, and I think it's testament to how far Szczesny's come that now he is being lauded as one of the best keepers in the league, not just by those that have always believed in him, but also by sort of the critics and the so-called pundits. He definitely kind of kept us in it at times, and like he has done in a couple of matches this season. I think what's impressive is Arsenal at the moment are really able to grind out wins, if you want to put it that way. I think it was a much easier game in the second half, but I think if you look at it sort of overall, I think it was a hard-fought win, and it was nice to see little Santi Cazorla getting sort of back to his best form after sort of a few months of some pretty turgid performances due to sort of injury and stuff. Yeah,
definitely agreed. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, pretty much what Daniel said, really. It was one of those games against a struggling side that sort of ended up feeling completely routine. But until we actually scored, I wasn't comfortable. I was still sort of checking the clock every sort of 5 minutes, because coming into it, Fulham have been a bit of a mixed bag, really. It's down to their aging squad and being able to keep up the intensity of their football over the games that they've been playing. So I wasn't sure which Fulham was really going to turn up, but I think the result was inevitable, and we had some outstanding performances. Daniel already said Szczesny, but I thought Monreal was just relentless. Like the whole game, he was in their half, and I think he was a bit predictable. He was trying to play the sort of 1-2 pass that eventually led to the goal, and I think that's why it wasn't paying off until it did, because Fulham was sort of just reading it and blocking it. But absolutely delighted with that. 3 points, on to the next one.
Yeah, brilliant. I definitely agree with you both on Szczesny. It was quite frustrating because somebody who sits near us, there was the one moment where Szczesny made a save. He came out right into the top corner of his box. He came out really well, and then he passed it, but it went off for a throw-in. Yeah. And this guy just went off on one. He said he does one good thing and two bad things. And it's kind of like you see a couple of people looking at each other thinking, he's played really well recently. What are you going on about?
But it's the anticipation, wasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, off his line, he
Every
came out really well.
Every time, he's just sort of sweeping away the danger, and he's so aware now. He's come on leaps and bounds. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
I think Szczesny didn't. I don't think he didn't have that much to do, though, did he? I mean,
No.
I watched match of the day. I watched the match of the day, and they were talking about the Sidwell shot, and I thought to myself, well, if I'm completely honest, it looked a little bit Sky Sports cameras-y, because it was pretty routine from Szczesny. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that he's not been absolutely fantastic, and he's kept us in games, and ever since the run that we've been on since the beginning of March time of last year, he's saved us points time and time again. But for me, Fulham never really offered anything. Rene Müller-Rullenstein, however you say his name, I do wonder if he lives his life, or he plays his football style based on Football Manager from like 3-4 years ago. When you used to take a game, if you don't want to take on one of the big teams and you haven't got a cheat, I reckon like a cheat to give you infinite money. You have to take on a team with like no money. So what you do, I mean, I used to do this when I was in lower division teams. I'd then just I'd hit the free transfer button and find players with the most caps, and then just bring on board a load of old players on as close to free as possible. So I reckon that's what he's done. He's probably run a simulator through Football Manager, or Fulham did, because obviously it was Martin Yole that brought him in beforehand. So he's probably just got he's got the game off Martin Yole. As Martin Yole was walking out the door with his bags packed, he probably just chucked him a copy of Football Manager and said, "You'll need this, because that's what I've just been doing for the last 6 months or a year into picking up all of these old players." And it just doesn't work when you've got that many old players who just aren't that good. But yeah, just an opinion.
Yeah, I think with Szczesny, what's quite good about his form at the moment is people were going crazy in the summer and sort of last summer as well about us not signing Hugo Lloris. And what you chap said about him coming off his line against Fulham, that is the area where I think Tottenham fans, or the ones I know, are absolutely shitting themselves when Lloris comes off his line, because he gives away a lot of fouls, a lot of penalties that way. He doesn't look as assured as Szczesny does, or other keepers in the league, or as confident when they're sort of coming out that he is actually going to get the ball. And I think it's... people said, "Oh, we could have had a world-class keeper," and it's sort of, well, we already have one, so that's good. And what you're saying about Rene Meulensteen, I think what's interesting about Fulham at the moment is they've kind of gone from, at least accent-wise, they've gone from gold member to. Do you remember Kevin the teenager on Harry Enfield when he came back from sort of a gig and he had that Mancunian friend who just walked around nicking stuff, saying "sarted" all the time? That basically they've gone from gold member to that chap, and it's weird. I was listening to his interview, and it's sort of it was like Mancunian with just the slightest hint of Dutch. So he just sounds so dodgy. Supposedly he's quite a tactician. He's quite a good manager, and United was stupid to get rid of them. But it's a bit like, I don't know. He sounds like a slightly Dutch northern version of Harry Redknapp, just sort of thick as shit. But I'm sure he's a good manager.
No, he is. They just Fulham. It's their midfield. They've got Parker and Sidwell in the centre of the park. There's no legs. They need some impetus in there, and I suppose that's hence the interest in Ravel Morrison. But this isn't a Fulham podcast, so
they've got Scotty Parker, and as many people would tell you, if we had Scotty Parker, we would have won the league about 6 times by now.
Yeah.
Super Scotty Parker.
It's interesting why they don't play that Kasami, because he seems to be full of running. He scored that wonder goal a few weeks ago, didn't he? When I've seen him, he looks okay.
I think he's just trying to find the balance of what's best for them, because they're technically some good players, and Berbatov is interesting. How was it, Chris? Has your mind changed on Berbatov after seeing him on Saturday?
No. He spent half the time shrugging his shoulders and pointing to the direction of space where he wanted other players to run into. And it's like, I'm sorry, but you're not. You can't play with 11 men behind the ball because you're playing against Arsenal and they'll cut you apart. And then when you're up front on your own, suddenly start pointing to spaces in front of you, because you can't have it both ways. You've not got Nightcrawler on your team, and he won't disappear at one side of the pitch and just reappear at another side of the pitch to run into. So Berbatov's it was always a bit of a strange one when he signed for Fulham, because it just didn't strike me as a Fulham type signing, and I still would rather not have Berbatov. I don't think we will sign him, but I hope we don't, because...
Did you see his little spin, Chris? There was one point where he got annoyed and he punched the air, and he punched it so hard he did a little twirl with it as well.
Beautiful.
Did it look pretty?
Daniel, what's your view on Berbatov? Be interested to hear.
I think that there's the argument that if you put him in a team like Arsenal's, he's going to perform at a much higher level because he's surrounded by much more technically astute players. He won't have to constantly point to space for players to be there because they'll already know to be there anyway. But I think there you have the certain type of highly creative, highly intelligent attacking players, someone like Berbatov, who is insanely talented. But you get some of them who are just completely unable to accept that there are players of lesser technical ability who have made it to the same level in the game as they have, and they get exasperated like, why aren't you in that space? I know that you should be in that space because that's where I want to play the ball. Why aren't you on my wavelength? And I'm not comparing him to Dennis Bergkamp for a second, but I think if you look back to the Dennis Bergkamp when he joined Arsenal in 1995, we didn't have the amazing technical players that we have now, or we've been treated to over the past sort of 16 years. He was heads and shoulders above everybody else. But I think what he did was he accepted that other players weren't going to be running into the spaces that he would assume they would, because that's where he would position himself if he was them. But he adapted himself and made sure that he was using his strengths to benefit the team in the best way possible, but also, without assuming that people are going to be at his level. And I think what it did is it inspired other people within the team to sort of climb up a notch, because like, fucking hell, this guy's good. I want to, I want to make sure I'm not letting him down. I want to be in the spaces that he wants me to be in so I can receive the ball. Whereas with players like Berbatov, I think when you have slightly less talented players and he's just constantly shrugging his shoulders at them all the time, pulling faces at them like, I can't believe I'm sharing a pitch with you. I think it doesn't inspire them to try harder. So I like him, but I don't think he'd be the most positive influence on the team. I think the team would enjoy playing with him because he's got great technical ability. But if he gave one of them a wiltering look for not doing what he expected them to do, I think the rest of them would just turn and be like, "Oh, fuck off, mate. We play with Ozil. You're a dick." So well, yeah, I mean, I like him, but yeah, I don't think he's for us.
I can definitely see your point there. And there was a couple of people sitting behind me and Luke, the guy who sits next to me, and whatever Berbatov did, they were just kind of applauding everything, no matter what it did. And that he's exactly the type of guy that we need. And me and Luke kind of look at each other and laugh. He'd hold the ball up pretty well. We're like, that's what Giroud does week in, week out. And we were talking about exactly what you just said. If he'd have done that in our team, I'd love to see it actually, because I'd love to see Mertesacker just go up and scream at him.
It's something that's, if you want to compare how people I know I've spoken to Chris before and he doesn't really like the flicky handy thing that Giroud does, but from a chance creation point of view, sometimes if you have a player who can cut the ball back in the box, or they're not seeing the space, you kind of, you do like, oh shit, I was open, and that's fine. That happens. But then if you look at yesterday, when Ozil did that quite weak right-footed shot, and Giroud sort of ran over to him like, oh, I was open. When he did it, he was smiling and laughing whilst he did it. It was like, oh, I can't believe you didn't see me. And it was a giggle, maybe it was sort of like, you're the guy who sees everything. I can't believe you didn't see me. And bit of an in-joke. But I could imagine sort of Berbatov just staring at him and then, I don't know, just sitting there and just getting the ump and just sitting there moping for weeks on end, and then someone would come up to him, and the boss would come up, and Wenger would be like, "Oh, what's the matter, Dimitar?" And he'd be like, "Mesut didn't pass the ball to me 6 months ago. I'm a bit pissed off." And it's like,
Speaking of weak shots, is this just me, or that second goal that Cazorla scored? It felt like, and I wrote this on the blog today, it felt like it took an age to get in. It was like time slowed down to like 1 millisecond took a week. And it just sort of dribbled beyond. And at first I thought, how's the keeper missed that? I mean, it was a well-placed shot, but is that just me?
Well, I think Kellenberg used his time-altering capabilities in order to position himself so it looked like he could have just saved it, but he didn't save it. He wanted to help us out. It did take forever to get in. And I'm surprised at how close it was to the keeper that he didn't get down and save it, because it was such a slow, trickling ball. It's like, I don't know, it's like he thought it was 20 miles further back because he took forever to get down to it. I thought the keeper was going to save it because it was such a weak, contained shot, and the fact that he didn't, and his fingertips were only a couple of centimetres away from it. It's like he put more effort into making it look like he could have saved it than he did in actually trying to save it.
Yeah, taking a couple of steps and then diving rather than
it was.
Because to add some controversy to it, Giroud was actually blocking his vision. If you watch you can see that I think that's why he doesn't get it, because Giroud actually is in his line of vision.
It's funny. It's people are going to think I'm down on Cazorla. I'm not at all. But I'm always surprised when he scores because he has amazing feet. He's got fantastic passing range. He's got amazing, sensational close ball control. When he did just after Wilshere got fouled and before he got fouled, he did that sort of double quick tap side step, and he has fantastic feet. But I actually think his shooting is so erratic at times. You think with someone with that amount of technical ability, the amount of times he just skies balls or he just smashes them wide. And I don't think that his real calling is that of a goal scorer. So I'm always surprised when pleasantly surprised. I don't look at him
delighted.
in a negative way. It's sort of like Cazorla scored. It's like, oh wow, didn't expect it, because when he hits it, you never really know when he strikes the ball. It could either just be absolutely perfect and rifle in, or like the second guy will trickle in, or he'll hit it and it'll look like it's on target, but then it's like a gust of air just catches the ball and it just floats off into sort of row X or something. It's very weird. He has very, very capricious shooting. It's odd. It's very odd.
To ask a question, Chris, I want to ask you a question. It's probably irrelevant. I don't even need to ask it. But how do you feel about Cazorla, Wilshere, and Ozil on the pitch together? Because last year we had some issues with Cazorla and Wilshere sort of taking up the same space. How do you now feel about all three of them being on the pitch? Do you think that's an issue?
Depends where they play. If you play Cazorla on the right, Wilshere on the left and Ozil through the middle, then I think it's an issue. But I think Wenger's already outlined that the best position for Jack is a more deep-lining midfielder because he's got to have the play in front of him. He doesn't have to, he's not somebody who will come into the play. He has to almost be at the beginning of the build-up, and you just think back to that super awesome, wicked Norwich goal that we scored, and he picked up the ball from the edge of our own box, and that's classic Jack Wilshere, isn't it? So
I've got an answer for that.
Go on.
Mathieu Flamini. I think that's the main reason why all of our fantastic attacking players are clicking so well at the moment, is because we have that defensive solidity. And I think Arteta has become a little not better. I don't want to make it sound as though he wasn't good before, because he was amazing, but I feel as though he has become slightly more defensive this season, because I think he realizes that his position in the team he's in direct competition with Flamini for a role, whereas last season it was sort of between sort of him and Ramsey and Wilshere to be the two deeper midfielders, whereas now it's now, was before we had that horrible phrase that everybody hates, the double pivot. I think now it's a defensive midfielder, a box-to-box midfielder, and an attacking midfielder. Yeah. So it's kind of like a 1-1-1-1, and then we've got some wide players who decide to play wherever the hell they want to play. So I think Arteta's had to kind of sit back, and I think the introduction of Flamini to the team has kind of redefined the role, or that defensive role within the team, and it's allowed Jack to be, well, I don't have to sit back and defend as much as I had to last time, so I can kind of do that box-to-box role and just sort of mess around a bit. And also with Ozil coming in, Cazorla has to go out wide a lot more, so I think that enables Jack to not clash and get into the same space.
So hypothetically, Steve, if we get to the Champions League final, who would you pick as your first 11?
everybody fit, obviously.
Yeah, if everyone was fit.
You can't pick everybody, Steve, because then we'd have 25 players on.
well, then I'm not playing. I'm not playing now. It's a tough one, isn't it? Obviously, you've got Szczesny in goal, Sanya, Mertesacker, Koscielny, because they never lose, so therefore we'd win the Champions League final just from them playing together. Left back, you'd probably just about say Gibbs, I think. I'm a big fan of Monreal, and I think he's underrated quite a lot, but I think I'd probably say Gibbs. I would play Arteta over Flamini.
Somewhere in Bristol, James Rowell-Stokes has just shivered with anger.
I nearly said over the flame.
Passed out in a bar full of jam.
He's sharpening his knives and refilling the clip on Big Ted's machine gun.
I almost said over the flame, but I didn't go that far. I'd also play Ramsey next to him, I think, if he comes back into the form that he was. And then it's got to be Cazorla, Ozil, Walcott and Giroud. So Wilshere doesn't even get in that team.
No, so I was going to say Chris.
I think you've got to play the Flamster. So I would swap him for Arteta. But other than that, I'd keep the team as Steve just said.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know how you cannot pick Jack. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's been pivotal in most of our spectacular goals this season.
I think if Ramsey wasn't in the form that he was, I would, in the long run, if Ramsey doesn't continue that form, then that's the kind of position it would be between him and Jack. And the reason...
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Sorry.
And the reason I pick Arteta over Flamini is actually, as Daniel said, I think Arteta has adapted more. Obviously, it's quite a big change for him to go defensively from when he came from Everton. He's adapted more, and actually he offers so much more technically in our passing game. When he's not there, if we're playing the bigger teams like City, for instance, sometimes our passing just goes amiss, and you really underestimate how he can control the tempo of a game by just knocking it around and retaining that ball. Whereas with Flamini, although he's great defensively and love him flying in and stuff, but actually technically and retaining the ball, he's almost a bit panicky and rushed sometimes. So that's why I would pick Arteta over him.
Yeah, because I'm just interested to see how he's going to manage it over the sort of coming weeks. Obviously, it's a beautiful thing to be messing about with, but it was just interesting. I think that's why it took us so long to score against Fulham, is we missed Arteta. We missed that person in the midfield sort of ticking over. Whereas Flamini would sit there, mops up the mess, but against someone like Fulham, we don't need any mopping.
Yeah.
We need the ball to be recycled quicker and get it back in their final third. So that'd be interesting.
I do love watching Flamini, though. There was one point where Scott Parker tried to take him out and he kind of rode the tackle. It was quite early on. And I remember thinking, Flamini's going to kill you now. And then actually you watch Scott Parker and he went and gave like Flamini, they do like the high five sorry things. It was like, you better go and say sorry.
Yeah, and then he tried to blind Mertesacker, didn't he? Did you see that bit? Where he sort of bent his head down and he sort of shouted. It was obviously completely accident, but it's like people shouting, no, you're meant to blind them, not us.
What else you got on your list, Steve, in your bag of tricks?
Well, talking about Cazorla's shooting, another player that took quite a few shots, and I quite like seeing us taking shots from out the box, was Gnabry. What did you all think of his performance? Start with you, Chris.
He was good, wasn't he? He's very, very direct. He is good on the ball. He's got that sort of confidence of youth, and he's going to be a very, very important player with Theo gone. And I think he's going to get a few goals as well. I think also his rise in form is going to be really good for the Ox, because it will push Ox into a position where he knows that he has to perform when he gets a chance.
Yeah.
Slightly moving away from Gnabry for a second, that's one of the things that I was hoping a bit more from Podolski yesterday. Like, we talked about this, didn't we, Steve?
Yeah.
But because Podolski came on and he was on that left-hand side, which is where we were shooting towards the end that I was at, and so he was quite close, and I started to watch specifically Podolski, and he wasn't really dry. I don't know, I would have expected somebody who is coming on with 20 minutes to go and is looking to impress. I would have expected him to be driving a bit more than he did. Now, having said that, he still crashed one against the post. You know, like you said, he won a couple of tackles and things. So I'm not saying he performed badly, but I don't know. I just felt that there was a couple of times where the central midfield players picked up the ball and they were looking to him, and he sort of stood a bit static. Instead of making a darty run in field or in towards the penalty box, looking for, you know, the little flicks over the top or little slide rule passes in between the defenders, that he just sort of stayed still and just really offered more of a static option. So I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
Of Gnabry
and Podolski.
I mean, kind of quickly harping back to the Champions League final question. I would pretty much have the same team as Steve, but I think I'd probably go for Podolski on the left, purely because I think if you in the Champions League final, it's kind of one of those all or nothing games. You're probably not gonna try to, not be overly defensive, but you're going to give it your best shot to win it, and that means scoring goals. So I think you're going to want people who are going to be able to, put their foot through the ball and put a ball in the back of the net, which is why I really like Podolski. I don't think he offers loads defensively, which is why I think he actually works better when you have Monreal playing instead of Gibbs, because I think Monreal is a little bit more. I think he's slightly better defensively than Gibbs, and Gibbs is better offensively than Monreal is. So it's all balanced. I do like Podolski. He can be a bit static, but I do think that once he is sort of back up to fitness and he's got more minutes under his belt and he's got a bit of sharpness back, that with Ozil on the pitch sort of feeding balls in, that he will be sort of ghosting into the box and he'll get quite a few goals. I mean, he was quite static last season. He still managed to bang in quite a few. So I'm expecting big things. And Gnabry, he's been fantastic since he's come in. He can still be a little bit rash, but that's part and parcel of having a young player in the team. He's very, very direct, which I like. He's not afraid of the occasion, which I like. It doesn't matter who we're playing. It's sort of, to him, he's still got that nice sort of youthful naivety and a good naivety that, well, it's just like another game down the park. He doesn't get that sort of feeling of occasion where, bloody hell, we're playing United here, or of course it's actually not a big deal to play United these days, but it's we're playing Man City, or we're going to be playing Bayern Munich, or we're playing Napoli or anything like that. It's just another football game. So I do like that. I think he offers. He's quite hard working defensively as well. I think he's not scared of helping back. That's where sometimes his rashness is a bit of a worry, because he does put in a few of those sort of Paul Scholes-esque tackles. But yeah, he's really good. One of my next blog pieces that I'll be writing and expanding a bit more is actually how I think the return of Oxlade-Chamberlain is actually going to benefit Gnabry, because I think he deserves a lot of minutes, Gnabry, but I think when you have a player that young, you have to be careful of playing them too much, because there will become a time when he will have to be out of the team when Walcott comes back in, because whatever people's opinions on Walcott are, I don't really think there's any denying that he is our most potent attacking threat. He is the guy who is going to score the goals. He gets a lot of assists as well, and he is the one who really sort of puts the shits up other opposition defences in the way that our other sort of forward options don't. So I don't want Gnabry to get too used to playing and then have his head turned by sort of promises of regular game times or back in Germany somewhere when Walcott comes back to fitness. So I'd like to see a little bit more rotation there with Gnabry and the Ox. And the other thing with the Ox is very, very direct as well. He is very direct, and I think that's a positive thing, because I don't think Walcott's that direct with running at fullbacks, which gives us a new option and probably balances Podolski out a bit more, because he is also a bit like Walcott, not really running at the fullback, is not really that type of player. So having at least one player in the team doing that is good.
Yep, completely agree. How about you, Ben?
Just to add something a bit different, I think when players are out injured for a long time, I think it's easy to forget the issues that they have with their game. And as the time goes on, people brand them with the title of like a footballing messiah. So when they're coming back, they're getting keen and keen, and they want them to return, and they're not actually that great. But the funny thing about Gnabry and Podolski is that it's almost like roles reversed, in the terms that the second half cameo of Podolski, that's what Arsenal wants Gnabry to be doing. And at the moment, it just seems like Arsenal just really fancies Gnabry. I know that he's been injured and you need to integrate him slowly. It's like putting flour into a cheese sauce. You don't want to chuck it all in there. It just goes lumpy and minging. So, I don't know. It's an interesting debate, isn't it, Podolski, to see... Because to be a bit harsh, he's been a very good stopgap for us. And I don't think he turned out to the type of player that Arsenal wanted. I think he almost pinned too much on him, if that makes sense. Obviously, when Van Persie left and he was signed, that was done quickly, wasn't it? And I remember the window just opening and him just sort of arriving. It was like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah, he signed in April.
Yeah, that was planned. As soon as he knew, he'd got on him. And I think he was hoping that he was going to be somewhere closer to what Van Persie was. But unfortunately, he hasn't. And
I'm not sure. I
don't know. I'm not trying to be, do you know what I mean? Be like mega negative and boo. But I think he's a fantastic squad player.
I think the plan with the three players... Yeah, I think the plan with the three players that we signed that summer was more a case of redistribution of talent and responsibility more than sort of semi-like replacements.
Yeah.
Because I think Podolski's role has very much been out on that left-hand side since he joined, which is a role that Van Persie never took up. So I see what you mean. I think a lot of people maybe expected him to be the World Cup 2006 player. But I think that it's kind of the similar to what you're saying about sometimes players are hyped up when they come back from injuries being sort of, some sort of messianic return. But with...
Because they forget, I think fans, I do it as well, forget the flaws that players have in their games. Because Podolski, looking at him as an isolated issue, he's quite limited in what he does. Like, he's one of the best at quick interchanging passes that there is in the game, like the world game. But his lack of speed prevents him from getting into spaces. But then he has that shot that is just magnificent that makes up for it. That shot that he had, and unluckily for him, Stecklenburg just managed to get his fingertips to brilliantly, I might add. It was a fantastic save. But if that goes in, he's the perfect impact sub, isn't he?
He also had the one where the Fulham defender threw himself in front of the ball as well. So I think, again, a player coming back from injury, and we talk about Podolski last season, first year with us, double figures in goals and assists. I'd like to think Wenger knew what he was signing, because he's not exactly an unknown quantity. But I think yesterday, 20 minutes, he started to hug the line, which is actually, when we were talking at the game, we were kind of happy he came on because we would get some width. He threw himself into a couple of tackles, which got the crowd going, hit the bar, had a player block a shot. I don't really see there's much more we could have asked for.
Just interesting what you say, Ben, about people forgetting sort of the flaws of players. I think there's a slightly opposite thing going on with Oxlade-Chamberlain at the moment, because there was that period where when he was fit last season, the season 4, where everybody wanted him to be played constantly. Bring on the Ox, bring on the Ox. Wenger, Wenger, you're a fucking idiot. Why aren't you playing? Retweet Piers Morgan. And that's what it was like, But since he has been injured, I think a lot of people have forgotten what he can bring. And I always felt with Oxlade-Chamberlain is, especially coming from the league that he came from, I still don't feel as though he has fully adapted and he is a full-fledged or fully fledged Premier League player yet. I still feel as though he has a little bit more maturing to do, and I think that he is, your ideal impact sub, because he brings directness, he brings a little bit of flair, he brings a little bit of sort of dynamite and sort of gunpowder to the table. And you put him in for the last 15-20 minutes of a game when defenders are starting to tire, and he has everything in his locker. He has brains and he has brawn and he has fantastic pace and he has fantastic technical ability. And I think although he had that fantastic game against Milan, I think his best games for me have always come when he has come on as a sub. And I think a lot of people have forgotten what a powerful impact sub he was in that first season when everybody was screaming for him to be starting every game. So it's good to have him back as well. And it'd be nice to see him getting back to that level again. Because I think before his injury, I think he was just starting to kind of get into the feel of possibly being a regular starter. I think he obviously he's adapted to the league. I'm not sure if I expressed myself properly there, but I think he still has a little bit of way to go until you can say he is sort of at a level of sort of Jack or a Ramsey, someone who you want playing as many games as possible in the middle of the park.
Yeah.
That's interesting because we briefly spoke about it last week, but Chris, you weren't on last week. So what do you think about him, the Ox, long term? Where do you see him playing long term?
Was this a conversation that we had before the pod where we were talking about Wenger seems to be telling everyone that every single player is going to play centrally, but I don't know whether or not we're going to adopt some sort of Mighty Duck style flying V in the middle of the park.
I've heard he wants to bring Emmanuel Eboué back and turn him into a central defensive midfielder.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I've seen him as a tricky. He's built like a central sort of midfielder, as a box-to-boxer, but everything I've seen from him, he's got tricks in him and he can go past the man and he's quite direct. I think it's a good position for him to play on those flanks, and it's almost as if it's some sort of it's like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a creche. It's like a build-up. It's not a natural position. So what they do is whenever a player is building into their natural position, they decide that they're going to play them out wide, like he did it with Ramsey.
Yeah.
Like we'll play them out wide on the left or the right, and then eventually we'll bring them into their natural position. It's almost as if it's like a secondary position, whereas there's merit in actually having players that should play in that position, and that is their position. I think Gnabry and Yox should both play in that position. Build them as wingers.
It's an apprenticeship, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's it.
The
Apprenticeship
system.
Yeah, it's like you say with the
where
Dutch, they do play
players in random. They play them in different positions so they can see the game from different angles. And obviously, out wide, there's less pressure than playing in the middle. Like technically, they are good enough, but mentally ready. That's a different question.
Yeah. Well, Dennis Bergkamp started as a right winger.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Yeah.
They used to play him. There's a fantastic Cruyff book. I can't think of the name, but I'll tweet it later if anyone's interested. And it says about their sort of upbringing and how they used to basically make strikers play as centre halves and let other strikers run at them to see do the opposite thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they know how to handle it, and when they're in that position, they can think what the defender's thinking, so they can outdo them.
I'm a bit bemused about Wenger's recent comments about I see Gnabry going into the middle. I think I'm not one to say I know better than Arsene Wenger because I don't, but I do find it a little bit weird. It's sort of like we're so congested in the middle of the park already, and we've got lots of young players, and then you look at who's coming through in the next sort of 3 to 4 years. You would expect to see players like Olsen and John Terrell and of course Zelalemelem come into the middle of the park come into the middle of the park as well. So then to move Ox in there as well, you got even more competition, and then you're going to move Gnabry in as well. It just seems like it's just, I don't know whether he's just saying it because that's where these players see themselves. But I think sometimes you have to accept that if you want to play for a team like Arsenal, that you have to define your position a different way. You have to find where you can fit in the team and just go with it. It's like I think you tweeted a question to us once, Chris, about the whole would you sign Draxler if it meant killing such and such a player. And I think there's two ways to look at that. Players either force their way into the team because they believe they're good enough, or they decide they can't be asked and they leave. And to be fair, do we really want players who can't be asked to fight their way into the squad, regardless of how talented they are? Case in point, David Bentley, fantastically talented player, couldn't be asked, went to Blackburn, did okay, did all right at Norwich on loan and stuff, and then Blackburn permanently, and then ended up at Tottenham. And ended up at Tottenham. I think that ends the sentence. But,
yeah, full stop.
Full stop. Period.
The end.
Yeah, and then, or the other way is they find a way. They redefine a role, or they find a role for themselves. They go, look, we've got a bit of a gap on the left or the right, so let's do it that way. I'll make that position my own. It's a bit like Jack. I think he performed extremely well when he has been put out wide, because I think he realised that in the form he was in, his chances in the middle were limited, and by putting in those good performances, he has put himself back into contention for a spot in the middle. So I'd like to see Gnabry just come out and say, I'm happy out on the right, so let's just stay there. Yeah,
it's really interesting, like you say, Daniel. We're not, Wenger clearly knows what he's doing, but we've had players in the past, haven't we? You look at Arshavin, I think even Kleb, who were kind of central just off the striker players, and we've said, no, you're a winger. And now we've got these two players who look quite comfortable out wide, and we're saying, no, you will be central players. So it's going to be quite interesting, as you say, with all that kind of congestion coming up as well. We're kind of coming towards the end now of the podcast. One final thing before I invite you guys to make any final remarks. One final thing that I want to talk about just quickly is Ramsey's injury. I seem to remember last week there was a chance of him being back, but now they're saying he's definitely wasn't back for this week and definitely won't be back for Coventry. So I'm a bit worried, and I hope this isn't one of those injuries that drags on for longer than we're first led to believe.
Thomas Rosicky-esque.
Yeah.
Or Vermaelen-esque.
Yeah.
Remember, it was Thomas Rosicky actually was the first one, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, Rosicky was going to be out for, I think they said he was going to be out for a week and a half, and it turned out to be a year and a half.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he just has a little bit niggle. He'll be back in 3 days. Fast forward sort of 18 months later, and Rosicky should be back in training in about 3 months.
Oh, God. Don't know. It is a worry. I would hope that Arsenal have learnt their lessons and they're just being overcautious. The good thing is we're not all being too worried about it because of the level of squad rotation that we've got.
Yeah.
I suspect it's just Arsenal. I'm hoping it's just Arsenal being overly cautious and thinking, well, I've got such an extent of talent at my disposal. I'll give him an extra week than I would normally, or 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's hope so. Is there any final points you want to make at all, Daniel?
About Ramsey, or just in general?
In general.
No, not really. I think, the team are doing the talking at the moment, top of the league. There's not really much to bitch about. We'd obviously like to have a bit more of a cushion, but, it's that age-old thing. You have fates in our hands. As long as we're winning games, then, we'll do all right. So, yeah.
Ben?
No, that's pretty much it. Our next 3 games. What is it? Coventry, Southampton away, and then is it Palace?
Yeah.
We have to win those games. If we want to win the league, we have to win those games, and that's it.
Chris?
One final thing, and it's just a yes or no question from you, or each of you. Would you eat a pound of fudge and run the risk of slightly ruining your dinner if we could sign a striker in January?
Chris, you know me, I'd eat it regardless, man.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was going to say the same thing. I quite like fudge. So I'm just going to say yes.
Cool. Dan, you?
It seems like a bit of a weird way to ask the question. I'm still trying to work out exactly what you mean.
Sign a striker in January, and you slightly ruin your. You get the chance to. God basically says to you, "I will force Arsene to sign a striker, but you have to eat a pound of fudge just before dinner, which means you'll slightly ruin your dinner."
No, I'd say I'd stick with my dinner because I think Arsene will sign who he thinks is best for the club, and I'd rather he didn't panic buy. We've had enough of the so-called Elastoplast signings. We don't really need any more. So, yeah, just let him get in who he wants to get in rather than who people think he needs to get in. So
I agree with that, but I'm still eating the fudge anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Steve, do you want to split his fudge?
No, it's mine.
No, but then we can have ours and then some of his.
Cool.
Do you know, you sound like when I was younger. Sometimes we'd have a treat for pudding, and we'd have Neapolitan ice cream. And I detest chocolate ice cream, and my brothers and sisters all love chocolate ice cream, and they all used to think that vanilla was boring, and they soon clocked on that they didn't have to swap me a chocolate for a vanilla because they knew that if they said no, eventually I'd just leave the chocolate and they get to eat it anyway. So they all got three and a third pieces of ice cream, and I only got 2. So yeah, you bastards can have my fudge. I'll just leave now and phone up my psychiatrist and book in a few more sessions on the couch.
Cool. Thank you all, guys, and thank you for coming on, Daniel.
Pleasure.
And, Suburban Gooners out.
See ya.
See ya.
Peace out.